With her senses sharpened to a razor's edge, Aika moved with a grace and ferocity that belied her fragile appearance. Each strike of her dagger was swift and precise, finding its mark with deadly accuracy as she danced between her adversaries with an almost otherworldly agility. But for every foe she dispatched, two more seemed to take its place, their numbers overwhelming her with their relentless assault. Despite her best efforts, Aika found herself being driven back, her movements becoming more frantic as she struggled to keep her enemies at bay. Blood sprayed across the walls and floor, mixing with the stench of decay to create an unholy tableau of carnage. Aika's hands were slick with gore as she tore into her enemies with savage abandon, her dagger cutting through flesh and bone with gruesome efficiency. The creatures she faced were no less brutal in their attacks, their claws and teeth tearing into her flesh with savage ferocity. Blood flowed freely from a dozen wounds, painting her skin in a macabre tapestry of crimson as she fought on, driven by an instinctual need to survive at any cost. With a desperate cry, Aika felt a searing pain shoot through her body as a monstrous creature lunged at her from behind, sinking its teeth into her neck with a vicious ferocity. Blood gushed from the wound, pooling around her motionless form as she collapsed, her limbs giving way beneath her as she lay paralyzed on the cold stone floor of the dungeon. The warmth of her own blood enveloped her, sending a rush of euphoria coursing through her veins, blurring the edges of her consciousness as she teetered on the brink of oblivion. As darkness closed in around her, Aika's body began to convulse, her muscles twitching and spasming as an unseen force took hold of her. Her clothes billowed around her as if caught in a sudden gust of wind, blood droplets hovering in the air around her like ethereal orbs of crimson light. Gravity seemed to lose its hold on the world, the very fabric of reality warping and bending to accommodate the awakening power that surged within her. With trembling limbs, Aika rose to her feet, her eyes still closed as she stood tall amidst the chaos unfolding around her. The convulsions racked her body, each spasm driving her deeper into the grip of the primal force that surged through her veins. Beneath her now bare broken feet, she could feel the warmth of the blood pooling on the ground, its thick viscosity sending shivers of ecstasy coursing through her skin as she reveled in the sensation. With a trembling hand, Aika raised her palm, fingers splayed wide as she channeled the raw energy coursing through her veins. The blood that coated her body responded to her unspoken command, coalescing into a swirling vortex of crimson energy that hovered before her outstretched hand. As she concentrated, the swirling mass began to take shape, forming into sharp, spear-like constructs made entirely of blood. With a flick of her wrist, she unleashed the torrent of blood, the crimson spears hurtling through the air like guided missiles, their trajectory unerring as they homed in on the twisted creatures that surrounded her. As the crimson spears hurtled through the air, they struck their targets with unerring accuracy, impaling the twisted creatures and pinning them to the walls, ceiling, and floor of the dungeon chamber. The creatures let out agonized screeches as the sharp blood constructs pierced their flesh, trapping them in place with no hope of escape. With each impact, the spears embedded themselves deep into the bodies of the monsters, the blood pulsing and writhing as it sought out its prey. The tendrils of crimson energy extended from the spears, wrapping around the creatures and holding them firmly in place, preventing any chance of movement. As the creatures struggled against their bonds, the blood that coated the spears began to seep into their wounds, merging with their own blood and coursing through their veins. The magic-infused blood acted like a catalyst, tearing through the creatures from the inside out as it dissolved their flesh and shattered their bones. With each passing moment, the monsters' struggles grew weaker, their screams fading into the darkness as they were consumed by the relentless onslaught of Aika's magic. Limbs were torn from their bodies, flesh shredded to ribbons as the crimson tendrils of energy tore them apart from within. As the last of the creatures fell silent, their grotesque forms reduced to little more than shredded remnants of flesh and bone, Aika's hand slowly lowered, the echoes of her magic fading into the stillness of the dungeon. She stood amidst the carnage, her breath ragged and labored as she surveyed the destruction that lay in her wake. Though victory seemed to hang heavy in the air, she remained unaware, her unconscious body merely a vessel for the primal forces that had overtaken her. Eerie silence enveloped the chamber as Aika's body remained motionless, swaying gently back and forth as if caught in some unseen current. The blood that had once flowed within the twisted creatures now began to retreat, moving with purpose across the floor, climbing up Ika's feet and legs, seeking refuge within her wounded form. Unbeknownst to her, the blood, now infused with the remnants of her enemies, slithered its way back into her body, merging with her own lifeblood in an unsettling display of otherworldly communion. With each pulse, it surged through her veins, a dark energy pulsating beneath her skin. Then, without warning, Ika's body faltered, her unconscious form toppling backward to the unforgiving stone floor below. She lay there, still and unmoving, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm dictated by the unknown forces that now coursed through her. As the echoes of the battle faded into the eerie silence of the dungeon, Ika's motionless form lay, sprawled on the blood-stained floor. The shadows danced around her, casting an ominous veil over her unconscious body. In that moment of uncertainty, her fate hung delicately in the balance, leaving those who witnessed the aftermath to ponder what trials awaited her and whether she would emerge from the darkness unscathed.